An American woman who spent 14 months in an Iranian prison accused of spying is in Britain to publicise the plight of two men who are still being held in Tehran. 2 years ago, Sarah Shurd, Shane Barr and John Fatal were hiking in the Iraqi-Iranian border region when they were seized by Iranian soldiers and taken to the Evin jail in the Iranian capital. Ms. Shurd was released last September. Before their arrest, Shane Barr and Sarah Shurd were living together in Damascus, where he worked as a freelance journalist and she taught Iraqi refugees who wanted to go to America. In July 2009, they and a friend, Josh Fatal, set off on a hiking trip to Kurdish-controlled northern Iraq. They headed for a beauty spot called Ahmed Awa on the border with Iran and hiked up a mountain. The first sign of trouble was an Iranian soldier gesturing to them from the peak. From there, they were taken on a 3-day journey to Tehran's notorious Evin jail, accused of espionage. During most of her imprisonment, Ms. Shurd was held alone in a 10 by 14-foot cell, her only comfort becoming engaged to Shane. Then, in May last year, they were driven to a luxury hotel for a reunion with their mothers. Months of imprisonment followed, before Ms. Shurd was released without warning last September on humanitarian grounds. The Sultan of Oman is believed to have posted the £300,000 bail. 9 months later, Shane Barr and Josh Fatal are still awaiting trial. Well, earlier I spoke to Sarah Shurd. I asked her to describe the cell in which Shane Barr and Josh Fatal are being held.
Shane and Josh are in a small cell, the same size as the cell that I was in, about 10 by 14 feet. They have very little sunlight. They leave their cell 40 minutes a day to go to an open air room, which is basically a larger cell with bars over the top.
What about legal representation and any attempts to get them out?
Well, they've been denied legal counsel from the very beginning. The day that I was released after 14 months is the day that we were all officially indicted. Up until that point, our investigators told us, of course you're not being charged with espionage. After 2 months investigation, my interrogator came in and said, Sarah, I'm very sorry, but even though I know you're innocent, this case has become political and I don't know what's going to happen to you.
You yourself approached President Ahmadinejad.
2 weeks after I was released, I met with him and he congratulated my mother on my release. He said that we were good kids. You know, I gave him a big fat stack of evidence, you know, sort of testimony, all of the articles that Shane's written, that I've written, showing our politics and how our politics make it ridiculous to even suspect us of any sort of espionage or political activity.
So your politics are kind of what?
All three of us are anti-imperialists, we're peace activists. I was teaching Iraqi refugees that wanted to get scholarships.
But the Iranian government doesn't like peace activists. They're rather close to the Greens.
Right, well, we had no intention of being anywhere near Iran and we have no connection with any movement inside Iran. None of us speak a word of Farsi. Shane speaks fluent Arabic and I had been studying Arabic in Damascus where I was teaching. And we decided to go to northern Iraq because it actually, contrary to popular belief, is a semi-autonomous part of Iraq. It's often called the other Iraq, and no American has been kidnapped or killed there in recent decades. It's quite a safe place to travel.
The problem is that the border is very porous.
Right. And we had, you know, misinformation about how close to the border we actually were. We thought it was many, many miles away, and we thought hiking behind this tourist site that had been recommended to us, that if there was any sort of indication of any sort of border nearby, there would be an indication. It would be clearly marked, but it
And from what you can piece together, I mean, what are their conditions? Radio, television?
Well, I hope so. Yes, they have a television. It's mostly in Farsi, but the news has a ticker in English, and that's the only source of information we had other than letters from the outside world. Every word is precious for them. And, you know, the fact that they went on hunger strike just because they weren't receiving letters shows just exactly how important that is. I mean, there are moments when all of us completely fell apart, and Shane and Josh are both very selfless and caring and humble people, so at least that gives me the confidence that they'll take care of each other the best they can. But there are times when all three of us punched the walls and screamed out of frustration and fear and anxiety.
Do you think you are yourself still essentially mentally a hostage? I mean, in that you got engaged to one of them while you were out.
Yeah, Shane and I are engaged. You know, the only thing that gives any meaning to my life is to advocate for them, and that's true of their families too. Everything else is on hold, and it's all we live for.